Good day, everyone. Today, I will share to you the ancient Egyptian civilization part. After the unification of Lower and the Upper Egypt, the Egyptians became more organized, and over the years, they developed a system of what is called hierarchy. The Egyptian society was divided into social pyramid, like Pharaoh, government officials and priests, scribes and soldiers, artisans and merchants, and lastly, the peasants and slaves. The classes near the top of the pyramid had fewer people and enjoyed higher status. The classes near the bottom had greater number of people, but low status. At the very top was the pharaoh and his families. Pharaohs were believed to be gods, and their word was law. Below the pharaohs were government officials and priests. They were the most powerful group in Egypt. Government officials carried out the orders of the pharaoh. They oversaw the treasury and the court system. The priests were in charge of the temples and officiated religious rituals and sacrifices to the many gods. They also oversaw the important ceremonies surrounding death and burial. Next on the social pyramid were the scribes and soldiers. Scribes recorded information for government and religious leaders. The soldiers' role was to either defend the country or be prepared to make preemptive strikes against their enemies. Artisans and merchants occupied the next layer of the social pyramid. These included craftspeople and traders. Merchants carried products to other countries. At the bottom of the social pyramid were the peasants and slaves. Peasants worked the land, providing the Egyptians with a steady food supply. Prisoners captured in foreign wars became slaves. Did you know that the ancient Egyptians were polytheistic people? They had 2,000 gods. One of the most important god was Osiris, god of the underworld. People believed that gods and goddesses controlled the forces of the human. People would perform rituals and make offerings to please them. Egyptians also believed that after death, a person's soul went to afterlife. The journey to reach the afterlife was not granted to all the dead. There were many rituals to prepare the afterlife. One of these is the Hall of Truth. Anubis, the god of afterlife and mummification, would weigh one's heart. If it's lighter than a feather, the dead would be allowed to enter in the field of reeds, a place where one could live eternally with no more sadness, sickness, and death. If the heart was not pure, it would be devoured by the crocodile-head demon Amit instead and would die in the second death. Meanwhile, mummification helped the dead reach the afterlife. Mummification preserved bodies so that they kept a more lifelike appearance. Furthermore, the priests involved in the mummification process wore Anubis masks. They preserved the bodies up to 70 days. Only pharaohs were entitled to this process. Meanwhile, they left the heart in place, believing it to be the center of person's being and intelligence. The organs were preserved separately, like the intestines, stomach, lungs, and liver, and placed in canopic jars. The lids of the jars were represented by the 4 sons of Horus. Meanwhile, the organs were buried with the mummy. Furthermore, Egyptians did not consider the brain important, so it was removed and thrown away. Then the body was dried out with natron, a type of salt which has great drying activities. Meanwhile, the body was stuffed and wrapped. In order to protect the dead from the mishap, amulets were placed among the wrappings. In addition, prayers and magical words were written on the linen strips. In addition, the wrapped body was placed in a special coffin called sarcophagus and placed in a tomb. Furthermore, since the ancient Egyptians cannot afford mummification, they wrapped the body of the deceased and buried in the arid desert. This allowed the hot, dry sand to dehydrate the body, leading to natural mummification. Later, the ancient Egyptians began burying their dead in coffins to protect them from wild animals in the desert. Furthermore, it is believed that the original burial tombs of the pharaohs and high-ranking officials were flat monuments called mastabas. Over time, they created pyramids as burial tombs to honor their pharaohs, since they believed them to be both man and God. In addition, many items and treasures were placed inside the tombs along with mummies to help them in the afterlife. Unfortunately, the treasures of most pyramids were stolen. In addition to that, King Tuthmosis changed the burial traditions of the ancient Egyptian kings. He built the Valley of the Kings as an effort to protect his tomb from robbers. Lastly, after around 1500 BC, the pharaohs no longer built great pyramids. Instead, they were buried in tombs in the Valley of the Kings. That's all. Thank you for listening.